Hello, welcome to part 2 of our January Q&A. For anyone who hasn't seen it, we have got a part 1, so definitely go and watch that. And there will be a part 3 because we had a lot of questions. Probably more than what I was expecting, but some of them are really good about tech, about upcoming stuff, about what we do here, all that kind of stuff. So strap yourself in because it's going to be at least 30 minutes. The last one was, 40 something, I think.
About that.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Brandon is here. He does all of our testing, so CPUs, GPUs, motherboards, cases, all that kind of stuff, and then provides all the data to me. So yeah, lots of questions to go through, some really good ones in this one. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor. Hello mate, you alright? Yeah, just got all the bits for my banging new gaming PC. Just got to put it together. It's going to be so much better than yours. Oh, right. What did you get then? The latest Intel 12th gen processor, a feature-packed motherboard, and 32 gig of DDR4 memory. See? Miles ahead of yours. You realise that board needs DDR5 memory, don't you? Don't tell me you went and bought the wrong stuff. DDR4 is so 2014. I can't believe you was that stupid. What? No, you're joking. What should I get then? For me, I'd be looking at Corsair's newest Vengeance DDR5 kits, or if you're wanting that all-important RGB, then go for the Dominator Platinum RGB. Oh, you are a lifesaver, thanks, but where can I find out more? By clicking the link in the description below, of course. And you call me the stupid one. Okay, let's get straight into it. We don't need to explain what the whole Q&A thing is. I think we did that in part 1. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Ryzen 7000X3D series of CPUs, and what do you think about the rise of GPU prices these past years? Where do you think it will go? So let's start with the 7000X3D series of CPUs. What do you think?
It's a really simple question to answer that one. It's very exciting for gamers, and we're going to see a huge bump in the performance you can expect using that for gaming. And it really is as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's based on the same technology as the 5800X3D, which is the best gaming CPU on the planet. You know, even arguably against the 13900K, 7900X, 7950X, it just does things slightly differently. And you can see that in games that really can utilize the 3D cache. Microsoft Flight Sim is probably the most prevalent game, right? If you were to test Microsoft Flight Sim, even on an RTX 4090, you know, cranked up and everything, you are going to get very similar performance between most processors. It kind of caps. I think we get 50 frames per second, somewhere around that, 40 to 50 frames per second.
Yeah, our testing data for Flight Sim, we have, even initially when we started testing everything, we went over Flight Sim over and over and over and over again, trying to figure out why the performance
it was like
was so
something's
similar
wrong
on every card. We were like, this isn't right, and then we realized what it was.
Yeah, it was like bottlenecking just due to graphics cards are so powerful now, and in kind of comparative way, CPUs are so far behind. It'd be interesting if NVIDIA made a CPU, sort of where that would lie and stuff like that. But that kind of, the only way around it is through the likes of DLSS 3, which is upscaling technology, which then boosts the frame rate to well in excess of 100 frames per second.
Oh yeah, it was seriously, DLSS 3 is like magic.
Yeah, definitely, especially in that particular one title. Other titles, it does, do very much the same thing, but in that, it's probably the easiest to see the differences and stuff like that. The other option is when you test using a 5800X3D, you get a very similar effect. Not as much, if I remember rightly, but still you can see the 3D cache makes a huge difference compared to every other chip. And why are you going to go out and spend, $600-700 on a 13900K or KS or whatever, or a 7950X if you're just into gaming when you can use something like a 5800X3D? And I said it when the 5800X3D came out. I said, okay, it's exciting, but I'm actually more excited about what it means for the future, as in using that technology, utilizing it and bringing it to, something that is next generation, which we are almost, towards the end of January now, coming up to February when apparently, although there has been talks of delays, the 7000X3D parts come, and the fact that they are doing more than one SKU.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting about it, because last time it was just the one.
Yeah.
And this time you've got more than one. It adds flexibility and options.
Well, yeah, it gives you, because I think the 5800X3D, while it was a good, let's call it mainstream for productivity processor, and then, extreme levels for gaming, now you're going to have, the likes of the 7900 series as X3D. So for someone who doesn't want to have a computer for productivity and then another one for gaming, this is kind of all in one, that you could utilize, productivity sides of things for, your daytime job or something like that. And then at game, you can, at night you can still game. So you're getting the best of both worlds in one product. So yeah, I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And the fact that there is like slightly lower end as well, not just like, on the high end 7900 series, you have got something, what you could argue as kind of lower end, I guess. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, I'd always say never like pre-order anything like that if you have a chance. Always wait for the results to see what comes out and sort of what that actually means through, unbiased reviews like ourselves and other people out there. So definitely look forward to that. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting launch for sure. And then the other part came down to GPU prices these past years. Where do you think it will go? I mean, it has to come down, right? It can't go back up again. I think the days of scalping, which obviously had a huge effect, and mining and things like that, that was the worst part of it. When you were paying £800, $800 for a GPU that should have been like $300.
Yeah. It sucks too, because GPUs are getting more powerful and costing more to manufacture.
Yep.
So of course the price is going to go up. So it sucks. We know it sucks.
Yep.
But the prices are going to stay high for quite.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the argue with inflation. So this generation, everything has got like the cost of living has gone up. Food is up 12% this year compared to last year, like bread and milk and stuff like that. GPUs are the same, but there's still opportunities for brands like Nvidia and that to do something like we said with the 4070 Ti. It was just too expensive. 100, maybe even you could argue $200 too expensive. So it's actually going to be interesting to see what happens when mid-tier GPUs come out and if that actually forces things to come down slightly.
Yeah.
Especially if products are staying on the shelves and people aren't buying them, which for the most part, they're not compared to the 3000 series, the 2000 series when that came out, even the 6000 series from AMD. And retailers, distribution, and then the brands themselves aren't going to want GPUs to just sit on shelves. So they're going to have to do something, cutting prices to sort of bring that down.
What's interesting is with GPUs, we're kind of at a point where it's not even necessarily about raw performance. Upscaling is a huge part of the
you can buy like
consideration.
you can buy a product and then upscale it and get similar performance to what you would without spending an extra $200 or £200 to get a product that performs about that.
Yeah.
If you could get, say, 100 frames per second in average across games, or you could buy this product that's $200 cheaper, upscale it and get 90 frames per second, you'd be happy with that, right? Because it's almost there, but for a lot less money. So it's everyone's different at the end of the day. But we also have to factor in the cost of running it and stuff like that now, because the cost of electricity is through the roof and things like that. So there's so many different factors behind buying a product, not just GPUs, but anything these days. Which makes it interesting because it gives us a lot to talk about in videos like this. So yeah. Okay, thoughts on DirectStorage. Will you do any testing of it in Forspoken in the near future? So I actually sort of looked into this a little bit, and I mean, DirectStorage is an interesting technology in the way that it works. There's a lot of literature out there that could probably explain it better than I am, but it's bypassing the CPU and going through to the memory, kind of caching it to a certain degree so that the GPU and the SSD can talk directly. A bit like how we have with like resizable bar, where the GPU and the CPU can talk directly without having to sort of go through all these hurdles and sort of hoops and things like that. Anything that you can reduce calculation time or reduce the transfer time is going to give you extra performance quicker. Right? This isn't a new thing. We've seen SSD caching technology for years when we had Intel Optane, and we had, do you remember the hybrid hard drives, like part hard drive, part SSD, SSHDs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there was all that kind of stuff. The thing that we're seeing, obviously Forspoken was mentioned. People are seeing sort of drops in performance, like 10% performance drops on a 4090 in Forspoken with DirectStorage. So,
which is really interesting to me because I thought DirectStorage was for loading times, like primarily.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's affecting performance to me is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, loading times is one side of it. Again, like we mentioned in the last Q&A video, there's so many different factors to it. It's not just let's implement some technology. There is the operating system that it runs on, because obviously, Microsoft play a big part in this. The fact that from sort of what I'm seeing, DirectStorage is running better on Windows 11 compared to 10. Then you've got the actual games themselves. Then you've got the technology. So there's kind of a three-pronged approach to it that you can't really pinpoint one particular problem. Though you'd like to think if people are seeing performance hits in Forspoken, there's got to be maybe driver related or just game development related. But I only saw that it was happening on RTX 4090s, so whether this is more of like a widespread issue across multiple cards and things like that, you'd like to think if a developer's any good, they're going to address it, no matter which approach it is, through drivers in conjunction with NVIDIA, or whether it's the game development, or the way that it runs on Windows 11, or whether there's something more to it. Like any technology, right? It has to have time to mature.
Yeah, and with PCs, it's a particular difficult battle because there's so many different types of hardware and different specs of it that you're going to have to try to find a balance for all of it, where the comparison would be PlayStation. They know exactly what it is. So it's really easy to develop for that one thing instead of developing for a whole host of different...
You can't buy like a PlayStation in different configurations other than, with consoles, the drive space. It is, other than the drive, whether you've got a 1 terabyte or whatever, the rest of the hardware is the same. Whereas with computers, you have thousands of different combinations, tens of thousands of combinations. Have you got AMD and NVIDIA, or AMD, or Intel NVIDIA, and then you have motherboards, then you have chipsets, then you have memory, then you have SSDs. There's just... trying to cater for everyone is always going to be a tricky one. But you'd like to think it's going to get sorted, and we are going to see this technology mature, get better over time, just like with anything that we've seen in the past. Okay, next one. Any recommendations for a UPS for a high-power gaming rig plus monitor, or any plans to make a guide on how to buy and what it all means? I've been meaning to get one for ages, just don't really know what I need. I don't know that much about UPSs. I've never really delved into like server side, which I guess is when UPSs are, that's what they're more specific for, because you can't have downtime and stuff like that. I know that, there are brands out there. The big ones are going to be APC and things like that. For anyone who doesn't know, a UPS is an uninterruptible power supply, basically a bit like a battery backup. If your power goes down, the grid goes down or whatever, you could still utilize your system using that. I'd say for the average gamer, they're not really that big of a deal, because it's not that important if your power goes down and your computer shuts off. It's like, oh well. Whereas a server, it's slightly different.
The only real reason you would need one for a gaming stance is if you're using the same PC for any work-related stuff, and you need that little bit of extra time if your power goes down to save things. Yeah,
although a lot of software these days does automatically save. Like for all of our video editing and rendering that we use DaVinci Resolve, and we have it so it auto-saves like every 20 seconds or something stupid. Like, you can sort of do all this live saving and things like that. So that kind of defeats that argument that you don't need to go out and spend money if your software has it implemented, because that's free. I can't really help too much. I'd say there's probably better people suited to answer this question over on our Discord. The link is down below. So maybe head on over to there and ask the question. Hopefully you can get an answer over there. There's some really knowledgeable people. Anyone who's not on our Discord already, definitely go check it out. It's definitely worth looking into. Sorry, I couldn't help any more than that. We'll probably actually, I don't even think there's any point us getting a UPS for like our NAS or anything, because the power here never goes down, and the building we're in's got like 50 solar panels on the roof. So during the day, there's, apart from in the winter when it's grey and stuff like that, there's generally power in this building. I've been here a couple of years now, and there's never been no, I think there was one power cut.
Yeah, there's been power cuts while I was here. It was during really bad storms.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, every office, because there's like 17 offices in this building, they all have their own breaker and stuff. So, is what it is. But definitely head over to the Discord. You'll be able to get a much, much better answer than what I can give you here. Okay, next one. Is there really any difference between XMP and EXPO RAM Intel optimized versus AMD optimized? I'm going to leave that one over to you, because you've tested XMP, you've tested EXPO. Basically the same thing.
Yeah, in terms of the performance you're gaining from one to the other, don't expect much. It doesn't make that much of a difference, to be perfectly honest with you. It comes down to your CPU choice way more than it does your memory. And the speed of your memory is going to make a bigger difference compared to XMP and EXPO. XMP and EXPO is just for ease of the consumer's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, technically it is classed as overclocking. It's kind of an auto way of overclocking. There's a profile that's built into the DIMM itself, or DIMMs. And then if you're on Intel system, you just set XMP as a profile, and it sets the speed, the voltage, and the timings primary and secondary. AMD does exactly the same. The key difference between them is XMP is a licensed technology. So as far as I know, like you have to pay Intel basically to have that. It's a bit like, Thunderbolt and things like that. You're paying for a license to use that technology on your product. Whereas AMD, very much like we were saying off camera, FreeSync and G-Sync, one is open source, the other one is slightly different because it's hardware based as opposed to and all
There
that.
is software based G-Sync.
There is, I mean, I'm talking more on the high end, so G-Sync Ultimate
yeah.
stuff like that, which is actually built into the product, hence why the monitor itself will cost you more money because it has more hardware in it.
Yeah, which with the parallel to memory, one of them being open source, that being AMD EXPO, all you can really expect is potentially a lower price because you've not got licensing fees.
Yeah.
But you can also expect the more expensive one as a result of these licensing fees. It will be a little bit more reliable.
Yeah, I mean, we have also found there's certain motherboards that will actually read an EXPO profile, even if it's Intel. So you go on there and you go to set the profile and it actually lists the EXPO profile because it hasn't got XMP. Some actually have both profiles, don't they?
Yes.
So, it's basically the same thing. It's just branded a certain way. Obviously, the timings and everything will be slightly different because AMD prefer timings like this, Intel prefer timings like that. What I've found generally in the secondary timings as opposed to the primary. But we've got kits from, I think we've got one from G-Skill. We've got the Intel XMP and the AMD EXPO equivalent. They're basically the same.
Yeah.
I think one's RGB, one's not.
Yeah, AMD one we have is not RGB.
Is it Trident Neo?
Z Neo?
Yeah, RGB and then the Z5S. It's either a 5 or an S, I can't remember.
And when you're looking at it like
that,
that, of course one of them's cheaper. It's not got RGB.
Yeah, and you generally like to think the AMD one's going to be cheaper because there's no licensing fee or whatever. I think that's how it goes. There's no licensing fee, so therefore you're paying less money because you're being charged less money because they're not trying to recoup the cost for having that.
That's the same with any product that's branded or has licensing fees. You're paying more if the people making it had to pay more. Yeah,
of course. They're trying to recoup some of their losses and stuff like that. Generally speaking, I don't think if you're going to go and buy an Intel, motherboard and everything, you're not going to be like, I'll buy this EXPO kit, but you could, and then vice versa. But obviously check QVL lists and things like that, and you probably find on the motherboard QVL list, it's not going to list an EXPO kit for an Intel motherboard and vice versa. But there's nothing stopping you in theory doing it. It's just if that stability is guaranteed. That's kind of the main thing.
Yeah. So to summarize, I'd say it's kind of the same, but it's a bit of a mixed bag as well.
Yeah. That's confusing. Okay, why do a lot of Asus and MSI 4000 series flagship GPUs have so much coil whine and Gigabyte models not? Also on AMD, Powercolor 7000 GPUs have a lot of coil whine, XFX and Sapphire don't. There's so many variables to that one. Okay, where do we start? So the amount of phases within the VRM, the quality of the components that are used, how much power is being pushed through them. Yeah, if you had 70 amp power stages and at stock it's using 70 amps on each power stage, it's going to be creating some noise. If they know that they're only going to be pulling 70 amps and they put in 90 amp power stages, they've got a little bit of headroom, so it's not screaming. It's almost like redlining your car. I don't know why, I always do car analogies. It's like that makes it easier for people to understand. Hopefully it does. Let me know in the comment section.
You're a car guy.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think a lot of people are car guys, especially if they're into tech as well. Kind of feel like it sort of goes hand in hand.
Especially with electric cars, there's a bit of a parallel there.
Yeah, definitely. So that is one factor of it. Quality of the components, definitely. Although most of them are using the same components. And then little things like clock speeds and, how far they are actually overclocked as to, again, how much power it's requesting through the phases and capacitors, because that's where the whine is coming from, the actual VRMs themselves, the capacitors and things like that. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, with coil whine, you'll notice it louder if you're stressing your card more. So that kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's how much it's being pushed.
Yeah, if you're pushing through more performance, you're pushing through more power, therefore it's making more noise. The weird thing is everyone sort of gets a little bit caught up on coil whine. If you're gaming, you're gonna have your speakers on, or you're gonna have a headset primarily. You're not gonna hear it.
No, especially with the majority of people these days are playing shooters. There's going to be lots of gunfire and explosions all the time. It's going to be so difficult to get downtime where you're hearing your computer.
Yeah. It's not like people on the other end, like when you're playing with your mates, are going to be, oh my god, what is that noise in the back? And they're not going to hear it. No one's going to hear it. It's more just when you're doing your little testing and trying things out, and you're going to go, oh, what's that noise? Things make noises. It's just a given. That's just how it works. That's the facts. So there really isn't much in it, and I'd like to think, I think the main concern from people is if it's making noise now, is it going to get worse over time? Generally speaking, no. If your product is bad and it's making obscene amounts of coil whine and stuff like that, it's not like in 2 years' time it's going to get worse and then blow up or anything like that. Generally doesn't happen. GPUs, we've seen, from the mining crisis and stuff like that, GPUs get used a lot and quite heavily. If anything, during the mining crisis, there was a misconception that they were kind of being utilized so much more than during gaming. It was actually the other way around. So, they were being sold on like eBay and secondhand places and stuff like that, and still fine, after being stressed 24/7 for a year or however long. So,
I suppose the concern is longevity.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, out of all the cases you have reviewed, which would you say is your favorite? I mean, you've tested some.
Yeah, I've tested quite a few.
What one, out of the ones you've tested, because you've been with us basically a year now, so what would you say is your favourite that you've tested and built in, had to look at and stuff like that?
NZXT cases are always nice to build in.
Yeah.
They have a very system builder kind of mindset.
Yeah. When they develop them, because they have BLD, they like to focus on, it has to be builder friendly, basically, because that way they can configure it to different configurations and stuff like that.
And the H5, is it the H5?
The one with like the ducted fan. Yeah.
It's not the greatest case in the world, but I like to see new things.
Innovation.
Like that fan adds just that little bit extra.
Yeah.
It's something different, and I really like that about it.
I love how some people actually referred it to as a toilet bowl. Just kind of get, I mean, if your toilet's that sort of angle, then I'd be a little bit worried, more like a urinal, I guess. But I get the mentality behind it. What it meant in practice is, it did a job, and it was different to, similar cases out there on the market. Corsair 4000 series and stuff like that. The H9 flow was nice. Kind of took the design elements of the O11 dynamic and just kind of went a little bit more refined. And I'm kind of sick of the O11 dynamic now. Everyone and their dog has got one.
The H9 is more subtle.
Yeah.
I'd say. Yeah.
I like the fact that the glass like meets and stuff at the front. That's just, a little bit better. I've always described those types of cases as more like a fishbowl, It's for a showcase, isn't it?
Yeah. You don't use that kind of case necessarily for the best cooling performance, because glass, you don't get airflow through glass.
No. That's why they have the side panel instead for fans.
It is just this barrier. So when you have the gaps in it, like what NZXT is really pushing at the moment, the airflow is so much better. And I think what most people are going to find is that they want that airflow.
Yep.
That's going to be the biggest selling ones.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why with NZXT, when they released the H7, they had the Elite, the Flow, and then like the normal. On the H9 and even the H5, they ditched the normal because
there's no reason for it.
No, it was a bit like Corsair with their 4000, 5000, 7000 series. I always said, because we've reviewed all three models, I just went, don't even bother with this one, because for the same price you could get the airflow model, but then if you want the RGB, you go for this one.
Yeah.
Although I actually like the idea of, on that one, the RGB but with the airflow front, because they are interchangeable. Obviously that does mean going out and buying two cases and doing it like that, but it still looked nice because the RGB kind of shone through. For me, Fractal Torrent, just a daddy of a case. Obviously they had the Torrent Nano and the Torrent Compact, which allows you to have, they are big cases. Even the Nano is a big small case. If you had a comparable small case, it is bigger. But the fact that they went down the route of having a large fan or a couple of large fans in the front, which means you can run them at a lower RPM, so less noise, but huge amounts of airflow. I think they're 180 or 200 mil fans in that, and it just looked different. It was nice to see something different because no one's trying to reinvent the wheel. A case is a square box looking rectangular type thing that houses all your stuff.
Same with the Fractal Pop, actually.
I
mean, it's a normal case, but the color gives it a little bit
the color
splash.
scheme. Yeah, I mean, we had the like bright blue one, and it was just something different. And I get it, it's hard because when you're developing like 7 different SKUs for one case, it's going to be harder because that's going to cost you more money in R&D, in manufacturing, tooling, all that kind of stuff, paint and whatnot, as opposed to just having 2 models. But that definitely appeals to like a slightly different audience to, again, the people who just have an 011 dynamic, which is a lot of people out there. And I see it on Facebook groups and stuff where, oh, what do you think of my build? And I'm like, have we seen this already? Like, you know, it looks the same as the one that we saw last week and stuff. So yeah, for me, Fractal Torrent, for you, well, the NZXT H5, just for the innovation side of things.
Yeah, because for me, all cases are the same to some level of degree, so I'd like to see something new.
Okay, with ARM developments like Apple's M2 and generally becoming much better than it used to be, do you think we will see a shift to ARM from Intel/AMD? No. I mean, Nvidia were trying to buy ARM, weren't they?
Yeah.
That got stopped, didn't it? By, was it Chinese government, I think?
I don't know who it was.
When you run a global company, you obviously have to... There's certain obligations you have to fulfill. One of them is like monopolies. In certain countries, you are not allowed to have a monopoly, which I think is quite funny because then what is the point in business? But I kind of get it that you need competition to strive for innovation and blah, blah, blah. And I'm pretty sure it was blocked in China, which means they could either... I think they could buy the company, but only operate it in these places where you'd like to think ARM, because a lot of their products are embedded and stuff like that. That's a huge market for like Chinese components, right?
Yeah.
So I can't see ARM competing with Nvidia or AMD on anything because of the type of products that they utilize through embedded and smaller stuff, you know, watches and things like that. Yes, there is an argument for like Apple, but Apple always like to like do things slightly differently. You know, they don't conform to the norm because they can and they can afford to. But when it comes to like the consumer sphere of gaming and enthusiast DIY systems, I just don't think ARM has a space in this fragment of the market at all. Do you?
Not really, but there is the slight potential that they could find a market in lower powered, maybe laptops, like notebooks.
Yeah, or even like...
Not even gaming stuff.
Even like sort of APU style things for education, government, hospitals, you know, anything like that. You know, like when you go in and you see the systems strapped to the back of the monitor, generally speaking, you're talking Dell, you know, and things like that. There's definitely a market there, but would the performance be there for multitasking and things like that? Which I think, you know, I haven't looked enough into ARM products to sort of see how good they actually are, because it's not generally something we look at.
It's not this industry, really.
No, we're enthusiast DIY and PC gaming, and going into that just opens up a whole different market that I'm not that interested in. You know, it doesn't push innovation in the same way. Yes, everything gets smaller, but I prefer, I don't know, more performance and value for money and stuff like that. And it's just a completely different section of the market that I frankly don't care about. Okay, will CPU performance ever become a deciding factor at 1440p and 4K, or will we always be GPU limited at higher resolutions? Take it away. You test the stuff, so...
Yeah, at this point, I'm starting to see a lot of 1440p and 1080p performance be very, very similar.
Yeah, like frames between it, and sometimes depending on how high end of a GPU there is, like it slightly can go like the other way, where you're like, hold up, why is 1080p beating 1440p?
Because you're looking at a kind of... We're at a point where 1080p is almost obsolete. In terms of hardware.
Yeah. You got to be careful there, because it is still the highest resolution. Looking at the Steam hardware server.
People use 1080p all the time. It's the most popular, but we're getting to a point where hardware is outgrown it,
oversaturated it. Yeah.
It's like what happened with 720p. That used to be considered HD. It's now considered standard definition. I think it won't.
Some
be
people still
too
refer
long.
to it as HD because they call 1080p full HD.
I consider those people wrong.
Okay.
I think we'll soon get to a point where 1080p is standard definition. That's the standard. It's not high anymore, or like full. Level.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a definition of high definition, like defining the actual word of high definition, high means, you know, above normal, Whereas if that's now the standard, it becomes standard definition.
It can't, by definition, it can't be high definition if it's the standard.
So would 4K then be called HD, or would you still just call it 4K?
I'd still call it 4K because it's the most descriptive thing for it.
But it's still a high definition resolution.
Yeah, because what is it that 1440
it's Ultra HD,
is?
isn't it?
1440 is
2K.
QHD.
Yeah. So 2K, some people, I hate calling it 2K though.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, quad HD basically, because it's 4 times 1080p. But then 4K is 8 times, which is where people get really, really confused, because you're getting 4 times that way, but also that way, which technically then becomes 8 times the resolution. Hence why you can fit 4 1080p displays, because you're getting width and height within a 4K screen, which is why I use a 4K screen as my second monitor, so I can put Discord in one corner, Skype in another, emails, and I literally split it like I've got 4 mini screens.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it works for me for productivity. And then I've got a super duper ultra wide 5K monitor. It's a tricky one that I think you're right. 720p is just like, what? Like, it sounds so old and aged and ancient.
Like, some people would look at 720p and be like, how is this in any way high definition?
No,
and I'm like that. I used to have a 720p monitor, and now if I look at 720p, I'm just like, God, you can count the pixels. You can smell them.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. So becoming a deciding factor. When we test CPUs, we will always, at least for the foreseeable future, do 1080p, because that way you're taking a variable out of the equation, which is the GPU. You are letting the CPU stretch its legs to a performance peak. Then if you're testing a GPU, then obviously it makes more sense of going to the peak resolution of where that GPU is aimed at. So if you're looking at like a 3060 Ti sort of level performance, then 1440p would be, you could do 4K, but you're going to see in certain games like Cyberpunk, when you're maxed out, it's just meh. And then there's all the variables of when you're actually testing a game of what resolution do you do is one thing, but then what settings at that resolution. You're not going to be playing CSGO at 4K on max settings. Most people, because they're playing it competitively, are going to be doing, I play it at 1280 by 720 on medium settings, and I get like 1800 frames per second on my 3090. That's how you play that sort of game. But then if you're playing like something like Cyberpunk, where you want everything to look amazing, you're going to go the other end of the scale, and you're going to be doing the highest resolution you can do, the highest settings.
Plenty of people would be happy with 30 if it looks amazing.
I used to play Cyberpunk. So when Cyberpunk came out, I streamed it, and I couldn't run it. I had to, it looked terrible on stream. Looked amazing to me, but it looked terrible on stream. I had to actually cap it at 30 frames per second, and everyone said, "Oh my god, it looks amazing." I was like, "Do you know what? It feels fluid." Yeah. So
it really depends.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the whole, "Oh my god, it has to be at least 60 frames per second." I was playing at 30, and I was happy. I was content, and all the people watching it on Twitch at the time, said it looked amazing.
So, because it's not 30 being a bad frame rate, it's
consistency.
Consistency. If you're going up and down, that's what makes it a bad experience.
Oh yeah. If you were gaming and you had a fluid frame rate, not fixed or anything like that, and it was going like 48, 26, 49, 20, up to 70 frames per second, wow, and then looking and it drops down to 8. This is why when we do our graphs and stuff like that in the charts, we do average and 1% lows to show the average of these dips and everything. What is better, having this broad spectrum of kind of going from here to here, or just having a consistent fluid? I guarantee you that would feel better.
It's a better experience.
Definitely.
And there's a point of this that we haven't even considered: the refresh rate of your monitor.
Yeah, that's one for another video. Like we could literally sit here all day talking about all of these different variables, and just it would go on forever, really, wouldn't it? So maybe we'll talk more about that on Discord. Link down below, because we're opening up a completely different can of worms that we could talk about for hours and hours. And again, that depends on what game or type of game you're playing and stuff like that as well, as to if you really need high refresh rate. And then you've got response time, latency. I'm going to stop now because, we could go on forever with that. Okay, the usual. Best upcoming products you're looking forward to. 7900X3D. You?
7900X3D.
And lower end GPUs. I'm not talking low end, I'm talking mid-range, hoping that they'd be priced well. Which I'm kind of fearful based on the 4070 Ti coming in at like $800 and then AIB models coming in close to like $1,000. I'm hoping, sort of 4060s. I think AMD are going to be the ones to force NVIDIA there.
Yeah.
Because AMD have, generally speaking, been the better value for money when you look at the 6700, 6600 XT. I don't really want to talk about anything lower end than that because they were terrible, like the 6400. NVIDIA have always kind of suffered more at the low end, like the 1630 was terrible. So I think, if NVIDIA come out with something, it would have to be priced aggressively because they know that AMD are going to be able to be more aggressive at those, let's call it 299 up to 499 kind of price points.
With lower spec graphics cards, their release doesn't excite me because the potential for those graphics cards. It excites me for the fact that it could lead to an opening door in the second-hand market for the cards that from last generation that perform better than this new one, being priced better.
Well, we had that when we did the 1630 versus 6400. Our conclusion was buy a 5600 XT, I think it was.
Yeah, it was buy an older used one that does a better job.
Yes, obviously you're not going to get the same technologies if you're into streaming and stuff, but you're not going to buy that card if you're into streaming.
No.
So it kind of...
The only real reason you would buy a card like that is for the size. If you need it in a small system.
The 6400 was like tiny, low profile thing, but then it had one of them really whiny fans on it. So you kind of, I don't know, they're giving with one hand and taking away with another, and trying to strike that balance is extremely, extremely difficult. So it makes it a tough one. But I think, AMD, generally speaking, ignoring the low end, talking about more sort of, $300 to $500, generally have been better, if history dictates anything, on the last generation. Generation before, slightly different with, some of the 16 series and things like 1650, although they're still at quite a high price now. So if you're going to be looking at that end of the market, I would wait to see what comes out, because even if you don't buy what comes out, you could buy something that's older, because that will come down, that's better, and that will come down in price as well.
Same thing with the 4070 Ti. It's priced around the same as, what was it, a 3090 Ti?
No. 3090 Ti was like $1,500.
I meant now.
Oh, now. So 4070 Ti, if you're looking at, say, an AIB one, like the Asus Tough that we looked at, which was basically $1,000. For $1,000, you could either buy a 7900 XTX, which is better, or you could buy a 3080 Ti for about $800. So you're actually saving money and getting comparable, if not slightly better performance. DLSS 3 to one side. Yeah. We're talking about pure rasterization and things like that. Yeah, if you don't care about the latest this and the latest that and the AV1 encoder and things for streaming, 30 series is still amazing, and you can actually get better for less money.
Secondhand should always be your consideration.
Yeah, I think just some people, I don't like buying secondhand stuff and things like that, not just with products for this industry, but anything, because you are forfeiting warranties and stuff like that. There's always the fear it hasn't been used for this, hasn't been taken apart. So there is that, but do your own research and sort of, decide what's right for you. Okay, so last one before we finish part 2. There will be a part 3 of this Q&A as well, but best budget build for 2023. I think it's too early to say.
Yeah, we're in January right now.
Yeah, there's still a lot of new products due to come. Budget build, I think the low-end 7000X3D part could be an interesting one. Was it 7700X3D? Are they doing lower than that? I can't even think at the moment. But the low end on there. Then you've also got Intel with like, what's the one we've been testing? The
13400?
13400F?
F,
yeah. So the 13400F. If you're just into like gaming, that could be actually a great one. Pair that with a B series motherboard. You could even get a motherboard with DDR4 support, so you're keeping that budget a little bit more in check. Something like 3600 to 4000 megahertz memory, 1 terabyte NVMe drive. They've come down in price as well. Everything is going the right direction, but I wouldn't like to say, this is like the best to buy right now. Maybe coming into February, maybe we'll do like these are the best systems you can buy for these price points, where we'll kind of work all that out. Maybe we'll talk to like a system integrator and try and spec up some systems with them as to what we'd recommend based on different price points. So let us know what price points you'd actually want to see in the comment section below, and we can potentially work on some content based around that. I think there's some stuff to be had, and prices are going the right direction, but they're not quite where they need to be yet, especially when it comes to like GPUs. I mean, some of the 7000 series stuff is still good value, but AM4 is still, you could argue, better value at the moment.
Yeah.
And then used as well.
Problem is, right now, there is no such thing as a budget build.
No.
You can't.
What does it even mean, budget build? Like, I think people decipher that one of two ways. Budget means you are on a low end budget.
Yeah.
Or budget could be argued as the best value for money, which could actually be extremely high end, but you get a lot of performance, a lot of bang for your buck, which anyone who's ever watched any of our videos will know I'm all for that. All about the whole, getting the very best for your money, even if it is spending more, but getting more. That's where you kind of have to, it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah. I mean, with any product, I've always had the stance that if you buy a more expensive, better product, that'll last you longer than a cheaper, worse product.
Buy cheap, buy twice, definitely. Especially if, like, PCs to one side, I bought a set of knives and a set of pots and pans, right? My knives were like 700 quid, kitchen knives. My pots and pans were about the same. My missus went crazy. You spent like 1,400 quid on knives and pans. But we'll never have to buy any again because they come with, lifetime warranties.
And then meanwhile, my pots and pans, I think, were budget ones for like 30 quid, and the coating on them is coming off and we need to get new ones.
Exactly. I did the same with my chair. At home, I've got a Herman Miller Aeron Executive. Comes with a 12-year warranty. Cost me £1,200. That's £100 per year, right? Because after 11 and a half years, if something breaks, warranty claim, they replace that part, whether it's the arm or, whatever.
You've bought a chair for life.
Yeah.
Not a few years.
No, exactly. I'd like to think it's going to last longer than 12 years. I think I'm about 9 years in. It still looks brand new. There's not that much can go wrong on a chair. I know people, when Staples used to exist in the UK and everything, they'd go out and pay £300 for a chair and it would last them 2 years before like the arms, the leather on there would just rip to pieces. So they've actually spent £150 per year. I've spent £100 per year. I'm quids in. I get it, not everyone can afford to buy that up front and spend that amount of money, but if you can, sometimes it actually pays to do that. And you will find out with a lot of brands, their products will last longer, but you pay more for it. That's why, because you're not having to replace it after so many years, so you're actually quids in. So yeah, hopefully that answers that one, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Second Q&A video for January. We've got a third one coming. I can feel my voice. I was off all last week because I was sick. And now I can feel my throat is kind of slowly drying up. And we've got to do another one. And then we've got to do a live stream for Patreons.
Yep.
So, kill me now. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. If you love what we do, then consider supporting us over on Patreon, where you get access to that monthly live stream, as well as behind the scenes content, exclusive game nights. You get discounts on the eTeknix merch store, and much, much more. And we'll see you in hopefully part 3. If you've watched part 1 already, this is part 2. Part 3 is coming. So yeah, let's do this. See you later. Bye-bye.